right. Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimist, where we talk about all things film with a gratuitous dose of optimism. I am Seth Boyd,
I am Megan Tierney Flores.
and we are joined by a good friend of mine, Megan. You just met him for the first time virtually, Muir Mulholland, here to talk about one of your favorite movies. Muir, introduce yourself and tell us what we're watching.
Hi guys, how's it going? Yeah, I'm one of Seth's friends in Milwaukee, and I picked out this wonderful movie that I think is almost definitely in my top two of all time.
Mm,
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, most
hell,
recent Coen Brothers movie.
yes, hell yeah. I have to ask because you phrase it that way. What's the like neck and neck one, or what's the other number one?
Oh, the other guys, I think.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah,
I know I still have not seen this movie. I
Oh.
just know you love this movie. That's fair.
yeah,
Mhm.
other
Um,
guys. Yeah, one of the best buddy cop comedies of all time. I mean, three distinct acts
Underrated
with,
genre. Yeah.
oh yeah, three distinct acts with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell and tons of other names and just a riot, absolutely. But anyway,
Nice. Cool. No, we often talk about other movies other than what we're actually here to talk about. So, Mira, you and your wife, Erin, were literally like the first people Ann and I met when we moved to Milwaukee. And we were
Aw.
neighbors for years. We now live in different apartments. But so very great to have you on the podcast. Also, I should say some context. We as like a year-long double date watched all the Coen Brothers movies with our spouses together, and that was a great experience, which
highly
was
recommend.
yeah, I do highly
Wow.
recommend that. That's like I think it's less than 20, it's like 18 movies, and there's really I think only one bad movie, and
Mm.
you can power through it. Um, so recommend that in general. Also, just like it's a fun thing to do with another couple, just like pick a director and do that. So Mira and I are coming at this with the full context of the Coens.
And
Wow.
that's one thing that I'll say that like I've now probably watched this movie two or three times
Okay, yeah,
since we finished that series, and it really in some ways feels like a culmination of a lot of things that they did
yeah.
throughout their filmography, which I think is kind of cool, like, you know, a little bit of a crowning gem for the
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We should. I fully agree with that. I want to get more into that. We should note real quick that there was a few years here where this looked like this might be the last Coen Brother movie. They've since announced that
Mhm.
they are working on a new movie. Last I heard is it's going to be a horror, which would be very fun. But there was
Oh my
no
God.
animosity between the brothers. They just both had different things they wanted to do. Joel Coen did a movie we've already talked about, actually, The Tragic Beth. Love that version. Ethan did Driveway Dolls and documentary on I think uh, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Great Balls of Fire singer. So they both have kind of done their other things and are after a few years of working other stuff coming back together. So I say that because obviously when two brothers who have worked together since the 80s don't for a while, a lot of the tabloids, a lot of the articles about it is they split and they're not talking and shit like that. And like from my understanding, that was never the case. This was never like a hostile thing, just a brief throwaway. But it has been over 7 years now since they came out with a movie, which is a really long gap in for them. So hopefully they're wrapping up something soon. Hopefully this year or next we get something because this movie came out in 2018. It's our last joint film. Megan, what is your familiarity with the Coen Brothers? I think you watched this movie for the first time just a couple days ago, right?
That's correct, Seth. Yeah, staying true to my film optimist style is I like to just come into these things blind, mostly that I just haven't seen a lot of movies apparently. um, but I come into this as a really loving fan of
Good.
Oh Brother Where Art Thou? That was like a
Yeah.
high school one for us. And actually it was so we did like I did like dance in high school and we did a movie like full movie soundtrack like show, I guess.
Oh,
And
for
they had a Brother Where Art Thou little sequence. I wasn't in it, but I
okay.
remember just being like mesmerized by the soundtrack. So really enjoyed it. And another like wet Western Odyssey-esque theme like going on.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
really like having loved that one so much. Like seeing Ballad of Buster Scruggs has been such a pleasure. So I'm really I enjoyed it a lot, so much.
That's like for folks who've heard the podcast before, occasionally my very homeschool upbringing will come up, but for whatever reason, that's a movie the whole family loved. For whatever reason, even
Yeah,
though it's
I
like I think an R-rated movie, we could all get
yes,
behind. Oh, Brother, We're Out There, and I watched that movie constantly. And it's a great movie, and it's the Odyssey, so maybe it had that
yeah,
prestige of being high literature.
I
Um,
agree. It's like a closeted R-rated. It seems like a
yeah,
PG
that's true.
almost.
And maybe it's PG-13. I think it is. I think there's just enough fucks in there, literal like
Yes.
sayings of the words I mean, for it
Yep.
to get in there. Um, so Mir, this is one of your favorite movies, a movie you watch very often. I love you. We kind of get right into the question I was about to ask you. If like you watch this movie very regularly, which is I
Hmm.
love. When did you first become aware of this movie? Because am I correct in remembering this was the first Coen Brother movie you watched?
No, certainly not.
Okay, you were okay. You were already familiar, but this is the first Western you watched. Is that right?
No, because I've seen
True
um
Grit.
I'd certainly seen True Grit before
Okay,
this, and I'd probably seen some other movies, but this was one of the things that um alighted the love of westerns
okay,
for me. And I couldn't it was just presented at the right time, I think, as far as the
sure.
western theme goes. So it is actually a really funny story how I watched this for the first time. Let's see, this must have been in early 2020. Um, I was on the way up to northern Minnesota to go skiing in the middle of the winter, and I would later find out that as I was on this trip, my wife got COVID for the first time,
Oh
and we were
shit.
then separated. And so it was this really kind of like traumatic thing where I had to stay with um, some friends for like almost a whole week because like this was back when it was like, oh, we don't know how long this is all going to take and
Yeah.
when you got it
Oh
and
shit.
blah blah
Yeah.
blah. So anyway, I watched it as I was leaving to go on this trip. I was driving from Milwaukee to La Crosse, and then I was going to sleep overnight at a friend's house and drive up past Duluth the next day. And so anyway, my buddy who I'm staying with is like, hey, like I just watched this newest Coen Brothers movie
Mhm.
the other day or something or whatever. He's like, so let's put it on. You'll probably find it funny or entertaining, at least
Mm,
whatever. Right?
sure.
And so we haven't mentioned this yet, but obviously it's a kind of a little anthology of vignettes,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
I'm just having a grand old time during the first one, and then that vignette ends, and I was like, oh, what is this? And I was just kind of enchanted right away, and
Yeah.
so it then I recall then coming back very quickly later to watch it again and just being kind of just very enamored with it.
Nice. Fantastic. Yeah, I think we should, yeah, it's very important. This is an anthology movie with six different segments or vignettes, and I can't remember the last time there was a major movie like this. It's a thing that used to
Right.
happen a lot more often. Italy, in particular, in like the '60s on, would do this very often. And my interest, and usually it would be like three or four directors in a vignette movie.
Mhm.
But the
So
odd thing about this is that I don't think it was released in theaters, if I
I
remember.
don't,
it had a
yeah.
limited release so that it could be
Really?
not so that it could be Oscar nominated, I think. I don't think it
Oh,
actually
That's right.
was, but that's a requirement, and for the Cannes Film
Correct.
Festival also requires that. So
mm,
Yeah.
but this was, actually it is, we should mention this is a Netflix movie, and
Right.
Megan and I often lament about all things Hollywood business, including what Netflix really is now. But it was not that long ago that Netflix was gambling with something this risky. Like on the one hand, it's a Coen Brother
yeah.
movie, but and Jill and Ethan were really open about like no one else wanted to make an anthology movie. Like studios thought this sounds stupid, but Netflix was like, yes, we'll do it. And it was not that long ago. And it's a great movie, but it is
And
risky. It's
and
weird.
we ought to point out that I suppose now that you mentioned it, and
Sure.
I'm remembering the play to have a limited theater release to make it
Mm,
Oscar eligible paid off.
right.
Hmm.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, I did win an Oscar, didn't
Yep,
it?
it's an Oscar winner
Oh,
for best
And
original music or best original song. Sorry.
mm,
that makes sense. Yeah. Uh, Mira, I'm assuming you recall which particular song won.
Oh yeah, it's I don't know if I'm gonna get the title exactly right, but when a cowboy trades his spurs for wings, it's the
Yes,
it's
In
the
it was
Ballad.
nominated for
last
that, but yeah,
song. It's the last
Okay.
song in the first vignette, which I think surprises a lot of people because the song that precedes it is much more lively and exciting.
yeah.
But that one is actually not an original song. It's a rewrite of an older Western song.
Mhm.
From Destiny Rides Again, actually with Jimmy Stewart, and yeah. So I'm glad we're getting into this
There you
because
go.
this is a we should yeah, so this is an anthology Western um, that I think in most ways is it's very extreme stylistically, especially the first one. It's very extreme kind of parody, and it's pretty bold in general, but especially for the Coen Brothers. But like it's kind of based in a Western we have not seen in a long time, which is like the Singing Cowboy, which was
Mhm.
such a thing. This was like Gene Autry and Hopalong Cassidy, these very early kind of 30s, 40s. Like oddly, they kind of have a parody of this character in their previous movie, Hail Caesar. One of the lead actors is like the singing cowboy who the system's trying to make into a leading man just because of something. But like, you know, John Wayne was not a singing cowboy, right? By the time you get to John
Mhm.
Wayne, this is kind of already gone, which was like that was like 39 with Stagecoach. So this is like a very, very antiquated style of movie that I think a lot of filmmakers don't even maybe know well on the first viewing what's being parodied. So you have that, but you also have the violence of a spaghetti western or Sam Peckinpah, like extreme, this absolute murderous psychopath who is also the happy singing cowboy in all white. So Megan, you just watched this for the first time recently. I want to get like, what was your? Sounds like you liked the movie in general, right? But what was your take on
Well,
this whole
and
thing
do
of
you think
that
it's worth
one?
uh
Go ahead.
noting what each vignette is first or at some point here?
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, Mary, would you mind? Well, probably maybe we should take this one by one. We don't usually do that. We're kind of all over the place, but
It's
we should
kind of
have
a
some
weird,
structure.
yeah.
Do you
Okay,
mind
so
maybe
yeah.
Of
describing
course, we'll
this
have to
first one?
go and well, of course, we'll have to say our favorites. I would say, like maybe at the end.
Yes,
Oh, so
absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, well, let's take this one by one. And Mira, would you mind
Mhm.
doing the honors of describing each of them? And we'll just
yeah, I
stick with
can.
the
I think I
first one
can
right
probably
now.
go. I can probably go through them really quickly. I watched it last night.
Perfect.
Okay.
I just watched it
So
like 2 hours ago.
first we have the titular vignette,
Mhm.
the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Um, happy, um, brightly dressed cowboy slings guns and sings.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, second is, I believe it's called The Bank Robber.
It has a weirder name than that. It's
What is it? Oh,
I
okay.
have them pulled up here. Near algodones. So
That's
it's
right.
kind of.
Near Algodones. Correct.
Megan, thank you for
Dave.
pronouncing that for
You're
Yes.
us
welcome.
two white guys. So
I wouldn't have known as
Um,
well.
yeah, Dave Franco
oh, it's James
robs a
Franco.
bank. Is it James? Okay.
It
Oh,
is
it
James
was
Franco.
James.
Dave
Hmm.
Franco robs a bank.
A Frank.
That is kept by the same actor who plays Melvin in Office Space.
Stephen Root. We
Um,
love him.
and yes, and then falls into some other trouble following that after being apprehended.
Mhm.
Um, then the next would be Meal Ticket. One of the two that's relatively dark, but Liam Neeson and Harry Melling of Harry Potter fame um, comprise a duo who are traveling what looks like the Rockies and doing a traveling thespian orator show,
Mhm.
where Harry Melling, the thespian orator, has no arms and legs, um, and then yeah, kind of follow him around for a few
Mhm.
weeks it seems, and then would come all Gold Canyon,
Mhm.
with Tom Waits playing a prospector who wanders into a seemingly luscious canyon, begins panning for gold, and that one's great because you get to see a really old version of mining for gold and stuff, which is really, really
Yeah.
interesting. And then the gal who got rattled, um, I can't remember the lead woman's name. Zoe
Kazan.
Kazan, thank you.
Oh.
Yes,
Mhm.
I got it
plays
up.
a woman who seems to be very heavy air quotes well behaved and somewhat timid, who is following um, her brother on the Oregon Trail to the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and he um I mean, it's like 3 minutes in, he dies, and she's got to
Yeah.
figure. And then the final one is called The Mortal Remains, um, where there's a couple famous people in this one as well, where 90% of the vignette takes place inside a stagecoach, um, and there is a lot of dialogue, and something very, very untoward is going on as these passengers make their voyage to the fictitious Fort Morgan. And then you kind of find out more as the story goes on. And then credits.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the well done synopsis, and thank you for taking a victory sip now for folks because this is all audio. I will say I think in that one, Brendan Gleeson's maybe the biggest name, but I believe her name is pronounced Tyne Daly, who's the lady, Miss Bridgetman, is from Madison, Wisconsin. Actually, so shout
Oh,
out
I
to
didn't know
her,
Wow.
that.
local gal for
And
Muir.
then the guy who plays the trapper is also somebody famous whose name I never remember, and people are
Uh,
often shocked.
Police Ross.
Mm,
Oh yeah, he's
don't
in
know.
Bill and Ted's. I'm not too familiar with him, but
Oh well.
cool. Well, yeah. So that there's a lot of I think even just like what you just described, it's clear that we have a lot of different scenery as well. We have two kind of Southwest things in a row. Like we're definitely Utah, New Mexico somewhere with the Buster Scruggs one and the second one, and then we're in the prairie, we're in the mountains, we're in Colorado, we're in a valley with we're definitely in, like I said, in Colorado with Mule Ticket. In the Rockies, we're in some mountainous valley with the gold one. We're in the absolute prairies where the gold got rattled, just nothing going on for a long time scenically. And then we're kind of back in the mountains again for what remains. So we have a lot of different territory covered here, all roughly at the same time period. We don't have any dates for this, but before we kind of dive in any further, what resonated the most with you, Mira, in the first viewing? Like what is so rewarding to you about this movie about rewatching it, I guess, as well?
I think it just kind of oddly to me has high replay value because of the bite-sized nature of the short stories.
Sure.
Um, and just as I go, and certainly like we said with having gone through all of the Coen Brothers filmography,
Yeah.
it it I think is now even more glaring that to me each of these little stories seems pretty masterfully put together. I think you can
Yeah.
watch almost all of them many times and not just like pick up new stuff, but read different things between the line. They're just
Sure.
the stories feel properly realistic while still
Mhm.
being um somewhat vague and open to being collections of themes. And
Great.
I think that tension between those two is balanced really, really well.
Hmm. Megan, you just watched the first time. I'd love to hear your kind of like initial thoughts. It sounds like you're a fan, which is great.
Yes.
But what was your like first impressions upon seeing this?
I that was a great way to put it, Mir, because I feel like I went in knowing that it was parody going on, and then it got cartoonishly violent parody, and that's my jam.
Mhm.
Love that so much. And then it becomes like you say, like more like extremely poignant and like pretty quite
Yeah.
dark, like dark little stories that tend to not be like more of them were sad than not from what I remember, like and not not happy endings. And in reflecting on it, you realize like they are kind of I would say that they're like kind of uncomplicated stories in that, and not as a dig at all. Like I think that they are like
Sure.
very
It's
true
timeless.
to like a style of tale, I guess, of like
Mhm.
cowboy isms and folklore that very likely could be passed around. And it's really like what like got me going, of course, is that it's set up like a little Disney book or something as you're opening a
Yeah, you
storybook.
literally have
And
a picture, like a storybook. I'm sorry, we should mention that. There literally is the book that is like Tales of the Prairie or
yeah,
something like that, and you have a drawing before you go into
yeah,
each story.
and it's like perfect and really detailed and gritty, and I just, oh my god,
Well,
like that. Maybe that was because that's how it starts and you're kind of in for the ride for that. But like I said, like I just felt that they were perfect, like at bite-sized pieces as they weren't like too much. It didn't care much about like um making it real nice. Even our
yeah.
love story of the organ wagon is like pretty sad.
Yeah,
So I just
maybe the saddest.
very truly, yes. So in that regard, yeah, I you forget that that is a masterful thing to. And then thank you, Seth, for reminding me too of how many places we see, because
Yeah.
actually, like I love the story and like the vibes, I guess, of Buster Scruggs almost the most, because I think
Mhm.
it does set it up very well. But I you kind of can pinpoint like, oh, that might be like, is that Universal Studios? You can't really tell, but and it doesn't detract from it at all. But I always
Yeah,
do that thing is like, is that the Universal Studios backlot? I really like, it's ingrained in my brain.
right.
But so that was kind of like I was wrestling with it too. I personally loved the California one just because it was like, I'm a California girl and it was so beautiful. I couldn't get over how beautiful that
Are you talking
scenery
about the
was.
gold one?
Yes, our
Yes.
prospector. But it was
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
and that was pretty simple, like
yeah.
story-wise. So there was different things going for it that could draw anybody in.
I think we're kind of flirting with saying our favorite. Should we just come out with it right now? Because I will say I don't think there's any of these that are bad. I think when I'm rewatching
Yeah.
this movie, the girl who got rattled, I'm kind of like, oh, this is the long one. It's boring. It's not boring. It's really good. It's very, and it has, especially in the beginning, like that dinner table scene has maybe the most like kind of classic Coen brother minor characters of like the woman who's insisting it wasn't contagious, and then of course the brother dies of this same
Oh,
disease.
yes.
It's just like, are there extras? Yeah, just eat hers. She's done. And just all these little like these extreme personalities kind of, and then you have someone timid trying to speak up and answer questions, and absolute dipshit brother. Like I love a dipshit brother. That's always great.
Mm.
But Mir, has your favorites
Well,
changed when you
so
watch
let
this as
me.
well?
I'll pose the question to you guys. So
Sure,
here's
let's
what
hear it.
I think is a good way to do this, because it's not uncommon that you ask people about this movie and they're like, oh, they're all so good. I don't really like that one.
Yeah.
Pretty
Sure.
common response you'll get when you ask people about this.
Right.
So what I would say that might even be more fun is, um, say your favorite and
Okay.
a dark horse one where you're like,
Oh.
I don't know that I would come out and say this is my favorite, but I do really like a bunch of things going on here.
Mm,
And so, um, with that in mind, my favorite is The Mortal Remains.
okay.
Um,
The
I,
last one.
it's just, it's so juicy, and everything is so
Hmm.
untoward about it, and that's the best
Yeah.
way I can describe it. And we still got a musical number, so everything's there for me.
Right.
My dark horse one would be The Girl Who Got Rattled.
Okay.
And I just, the it's funny because I agree that it's oddly long compared to the others, and the story and the pacing of the story seems to drag out how that feels. But
Hmm.
I it's just like it is mostly an emotional roller coaster that you're on. There's not
Yeah.
there's not a ton of other action going on, but it
Hmm.
also feels so real and believable, and like takes you on that emotional journey. So
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to go about it, and I fully agree with those comments. So, Megan, do you have your favorite and your dark horse?
I think I do. I like the way that this question is posed.
Yeah. You
Um,
had time to think about this.
I may have already given myself away
That's
because
okay.
I can't get away that I think that the first one is that like the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is probably like it just has a lot going for me that I really like. It has the parody,
Yeah.
comedy, violent aspect with a singing cowboy. How could how could anybody not like that?
Right.
But I really wrestled with if I'm gonna say that Meal Ticket was my like dark horse, but I wrestled if that was
Yeah.
almost my favorite because
mm,
I think it is a very well contained
Yeah.
almost horror story that we have going on here. And huge Harry Potter fan, so it's just fun to see Dudley and be a stump of a man. And
Hmm.
I don't know how they filmed that. I really don't. I can't like tell how they did the no
The
arms and legs.
prosthetics, you mean?
I, the in Meal Ticket.
Or the lack of prosthetics? Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah, I
I
just can't
imagine
tell
I don't know either. I think it's
because it
probably just like some sort of straight jacket thing, and
I
shadows and mirrors. I don't know. I
like
don't think he
I
was that
figured.
visually altered, but I don't know. Yeah.
I know it
But
doesn't
no,
to me
it's a
look
great, it's
like
a
the
weird
socks.
performance.
Yeah, and
I think you should note maybe the most disturbing thing about this is that the character, I'm sorry, what's the actor's name again?
I forget.
Harry Melling?
pretty melon.
Melling. He is so verbose. He's reciting Shelley. He's doing the Ozymandias poem, one of my favorite poems. He's doing Shakespeare. He's doing the Gettysburg Address, but then never
Yes.
talks when he's not on stage.
Mhm.
And that's one of the weirdest things about this is he is nonverbal unless he's performing. And so, which makes his dynamic with Liam Neeson all the stranger, who is his handler, captor, whatever exactly is going on here. So it definitely it's I think it's the most haunting because there's some kind of hints of did Liam Neeson maim him? Is what exactly
Oh,
has happened here? I don't know, but
yeah.
we do spoilers here. Liam Neeson kills him at the end of this, so um gets rid of that meal ticket and replaces him with a chicken. So
Yes,
which
the chicken
has
that can do math.
a chicken that can do math, which has my favorite
Mhm.
joke in this whole thing at
Impressive.
the next segment. Tom Waits as the prospector is about to steal a few eggs from a nest, and the
Oh.
bird is watching them. He says, "A bird can't count," and then takes the egg anyway. So
Oh, I missed that. Oh my
It's
gosh.
unbelievable. It's, I agree.
it's the
It's one of
best.
the finer details of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, dang
Um,
it.
it's I I think just because we're gonna have to like the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is maybe my favorite, but just a kind of variety of talking about, I definitely want to talk about All Gold Country as well. But More Remains definitely haunts me a lot as well. I think that maybe is my dark horse one.
Mhm.
But um let's kind of talk about the first one first, because do you guys have a association of Tim Blake Nelson? Because I definitely I think we've all seen A Brother Where Art Thou.
Mhm.
Definitely think of him in that. I have not seen this, but he's also like the villain in the live action Scooby-Doo movie. Um,
Oh.
and he's been in a lot of things like that. So um, but that's kind of a kids movie, but still I think for a Coen Brother fan seeing him specifically where he's the sweetest guy but really dumb but really sweet
Mhm.
and a brother out there for him to be like murdering so many
Yes.
people while smiling and in such a bizarre way of him like the and this is like the most aggressive they give like the camera work of like him kind of slowly turning, smiling into the camera, doing like a Kubrick smile, and then shooting the bartender at the cantina and being so verbose. And like the style is just really aggressive in a fun, almost like French New Wave way of
Mm.
he's walking just like through sets. He's walking, and then suddenly he's a complete different place, and the conversation's continuing. And these fun kind of reminders that you're watching a movie, but it's very lively and very jovial, but
Well, and
incredibly violent. You
I
know?
think to Megan's
Sure,
point, like Megan has brushed up against this. The thing after having watched it so many times, I think not at all to say anything about your guys' enjoyment of it. I recall
sure.
after the first time I watched this, I was like, that was so fun, so funny.
Yeah,
And I'm like, that's exactly how
right.
they roped me into this movie. And if you would have asked me, I would have been like, that's my favorite for sure.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I think that this, to me, like the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the vignette, is such a good example of how calculated all of these stories are, because it starts off like so seemingly lighthearted and cartoonish, in many
Mhm.
ways, and brings you in with these musical numbers, and then it like kind of starts to get serious. And so I think it's
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
really well placed. But yeah, like you're brushing up against, Megan, I think that there's this cartoonish aspect to it. And I would
Absolutely.
say
Yeah.
it's the white suit, um the kind of chippy quick dialogue, even when he walks into the village called Frenchman's
Hmm.
Gulch, which might, I think, imply that it's a low-lying place. The whole town
Hmm.
is completely dry, which you wouldn't even
Right.
expect in a town of that time. You would have buildings
Sure.
raised up, because the streets would be muddy and full of shit, and it's not like
Right.
that at all. I mean, there's all these little tiny things that make it
Mhm.
truly cartoonish in a way that almost reminds me of, um oh my gosh, Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, Tarantino.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. There's definitely some Tarantino stuff here.
Yeah.
I think it's fully accurate. And then I think you're also right, Mary, like it kind of rips you in right away. And maybe in an initial viewing, it can almost be disappointing that like that energy doesn't stay through it, but it's a much better movie by not staying with that energy because you know, Buster Scruggs dies at the end of this one, and it's funny and it's unexpected, and there's a great song, and it's very silly that now he's literally has his cowboy wings and he's strumming invisible strings on a harp and he's doing a
Yeah.
duet with the man in black who killed him. I mean, that's great. But then the next one is still really like the James Franco Stephen Root one is still funny. It's weird, like he's robbing this bank and he's being an idiot because he's kind of trying to be intimidating as having robbed before. And then if he's paying attention, Chief Road is talking about attempted robberies because I pulled out the scatter gun and had to keep doing it in the vault for a couple months, waiting for the sheriff to come by. It's like, are you listening, man? Because he's handled dudes like you twice, and then clearly hasn't, and then has his ass handed to him, and just has like it's hilarious how bad his luck is. It does again culminate in him being hung and killed. And then you have Meal Ticket, absolutely grim. you know, then like all gold is a little bit of a kind of morale boost that
Yeah.
seems like it's going to get very
But our main
dark, but
character still gets shot in the back.
he still gets shot in the back,
That's
but
super
it
huge.
didn't hit nothing important.
I was
But
gonna,
which is I think
yes.
one of the reasons it's my favorite, just Tom Waits yelling, "You didn't hit nothing important."
An
And
endlessly
it's
quotable line.
so good. Also, I love Tom Waits. Big fan of his music. Love him when he's acting as well. But I just love that they kind of have him in this movie to just kind of do a one-man show for like 15
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
No one else has lines. You have that other guy in there. But like even that scene where it comes out that there has been a dude following him, waiting for him to find the gold and kill him, shoots him in the back, and he's not moving. And there's a long scene of this assassin who is, just kind of taking his time to roll a cigarette, to smoke it, making sure Tom Waits is dead. That finally goes in there, and then it's action again. He's alive, and he's hitting with the
Mhm.
pitchfork or the pickaxe. But like there was definitely a lot of tension, and having seen Coen Brothers movies before, like, oh, they're really making sure we know this dude's actually dead. But no, he's not actually. So
Mhm.
that one maybe surprised me the most in the first viewing because
Mhm.
it seems so like them to kill my man after he finds gold. That seems such a classic cruel thing for the Coen Brothers to do. um
He's like our biggest hero almost, like in
I
terms
think
of the
so. Yeah.
stories.
Right. I mean,
Or I guess
uh
like biggest like positive ending,
yeah,
happy
he has the
ending.
happiest ending, I think.
I would
Assuming he
say,
makes it back to town,
yep,
which I think he does. He needs
Yeah.
to be knowing what he's doing, and he found gold. So
yeah.
I think it is oddly that the happiest ending is for an old man is fun too.
Mm. Hmm.
But I think a kind of obvious question when you have series of vignettes like this is like, is there, it's a question to you, Mir, specifically because you've seen it so many times, is there like a through line here? Do you think there's a maybe coherent singular message or
Well,
something
there is a
comparable?
There is a funny tell.
Hmm.
If you go back and you watch the trailers for the movie,
Oh.
both trailers say that this is a movie about life and death in the West. And
Hmm.
it's not really stated that way at all in the movie, but when you
Right.
watch it after thinking of that, that is absolutely true. And it's so funny because I didn't really realize it, that you're right. Like Tom Waits is the only one who really makes it out alive and on an upward trajectory.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
even like you said, he's old. So, what else maybe does he have to live for? He's got to go all the way back to town. He's got to get stitched up.
Mhm.
He's got to wait
He's got
around
to
in heat,
register this claim.
and then he still has to come back out here and dig up all this gold. Like, there's a lot
Hmm.
of work ahead, right? And that's as good as it gets,
Right.
is what it sounds like, which, at the end of the day, I think probably still very realistic for the place and the time period that we're talking about.
Right.
But like, so it has been tough for me to think of it in any other way since like seeing that and realizing it. And I think that that also feeds into my enjoyment of like the uh the realistic aspect of how the stories
Hmm.
are and how they're presented, because there does the stories don't seem to be unrelated,
Hmm.
if you were to ask about themes, but they're very clearly like geographically not all very close by any means. Tough to say temporally because there are only a couple indications that we have of when these might be going down. So one would be Tom Waits um must be digging for gold in the mid 1800s,
Right.
right?
Sure.
um
Yeah.
and
The Oregon
then
Trail too. We have that kind of dates it.
oh, yep, that's a great point. And then um having the Gettysburg Address in there would also indicate
Yeah.
a
Hmm.
time period too.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, it's kind of, I think generally it's all happening sometime between 1825 and 1875, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Right. That makes
generous,
sense.
and I don't think we're gonna ruffle any feathers there. But
Yeah.
I think that combined with where things are happening geographically, like everything's a little bit of a slice of life to me, it
Hmm.
seems.
Mhm.
I'm curious
No.
though, I suppose if either of you draw more of a line through through all of it. Sorry.
Um. I think for me, I just think, and Megan, I start. I apologize. You should go first. um.
I'll say, well, I'm curious what you have to say 2 cents, but like I'll say that I agree that like I think that there's a theme going on and not necessarily we're not even even almost the parameters of reality. It just feels very like
Hmm.
this is the West. This is the good old American West. Like literally vibes, I guess, vibes going on. But for
Right.
me, I really love the tie-in of that it's like a book because it reminds me of
Hmm.
storybooks that like I remember as kids where things are just kind of they're just kind of a theme going on and it's sort of all there in a very uh, uh indiscernible timeline basically. So that I love the visual of the book that they included in the story and like to keep things moving along and I think that it that in itself kind of evokes more of the theme and it makes it very storybook like.
Yeah. Um. And I think we should just mention, because I don't know if we flat out said this, and again, we can spoil it, I think, as folks, by the way, the idea is you've probably seen the movie or you're listening to this, decide if you're going to watch it, but there will be spoilers. The last story is a ghost story. It is a true, old school ghost story. And that's important in context because I look at this movie largely through form, and it's really fascinating to me that as a whole, this movie feels like a very old school Western, is based off of Western texts, like actual like nonfiction literature almost, which is again how it's presented, right? Like it's a document of these are tales of the Old West. whether they're folk tales or what, but it doesn't even seem like it's a novel or based off movies. You obviously have so much of Western movies in this movie, but there's this kind
Mhm.
of we're telling this the true story thing throughout here that is very Coen Brothers, that is inverted often, especially most obviously with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the main one, which is so stylistic and hilarious and cartoony and has musical
Mhm.
numbers, is very surreal. But like the violence is always what I'm getting at here is that there's something so grounded in Old West tales that it sticks with that. It always has that, and it can add on other things as
Mhm.
needed. So you have this really foundation thing that is a true foundation of Western stories throughout it, but then you have some like Sergio Leone when it comes to the violence. You have some Sam Peckinpah, you have Tarantino, you have all these other extreme things. You know, you have the I think I mentioned like Desperate Reds again. You have these like 30s and 40s and 50s musicals in here and that flavor when it's working, and then it can go back to something that feels so grounded, including like this ghost story just feels like such a grounded um old west ghost story that like it feels like
Mhm.
it's something that's probably based in the old country in Ireland and England too. This tale, and it does help too that the two of the main characters in this are Irish and English. That felt very intentional to me of again these ghosts from the fatherland being here. And maybe I'm misreading that, but like it always feels like it has this truly grounded component that it never loses. It just sometimes adds something weirder on top of that.
Mhm.
Um, it has been said by the actor Tim Blake Nelson, who's worked with the Coen Brothers a few times, that the way to understand all Coen Brothers movies is to remember that they're Jewish and they have an Old Testament viewing of the world, which
Mhm.
is once you think you have the world figured out, that's when you're fucked. And
Mhm.
so I think that especially happens for Buster Scruggs. You know, that happens for a lot of characters once you think you know what's going on. And I think you can say that's definitely happening to those characters at the end, the Mortal Remains, right? These three people were having this kind of lively debate, and they're really firm in their convictions about things that seem important about how many types of people there are, but are actually not that important when it comes down to the life or death, right? And none of them saw death coming. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I love this movie, and I think there was a few years there were again we mentioned it felt like this could have been the last Coen Brothers movie, and it I think some of the reasons it felt like that is because it does seem such a like final note in many ways. This is all we've been doing
Mhm.
dispensed into this one vignette thing, and I was gonna be okay with that as a fan. You know, it's like, you know, this is if this is how you're going out, bravo. So yeah.
I'm curious, Seth, to hear what is there anything you're referencing really specifically that tells you that The Mortal Remains is a ghost story?
It's a good question.
Or is that your feeling on it?
That's my feeling on it, is that it's a ghost story because I feel like it has, you know, my interpretation of it is that the Brendan Gleeson and the other character are both essentially the Grim Reaper, or they're somehow adjacent to
Mhm.
him, and that the other passengers have died. And um, so maybe ghost story is not exactly accurate, but it's a frightening tale. And they,
I
well,
like
I
that.
guess it's the characters who don't realize they're ghosts, you
Well, and
know?
that's yeah. I've read a couple of things about it with some interesting theories about um where they're all at on their journey.
Right.
I've read some theories that say no, all like yes, they're reapers, and the three um the woman, the Frenchman, and the trapper are they're all alive and
Mm,
they're traveling to this place where they're going to die, or
mm,
when it starts they're all dead. I read probably the most interesting one was somebody who was talking about the color palette of the entire story,
hmm.
and they said, oh, you can tell when they die because the colors go from warm and yellow to cool and blue.
Ooh.
and
No, interesting.
and I
Yeah.
read another one along those lines that also had an interesting theory that when he finishes the song, the next shot of each of the characters on the other side of the carriage
Mm,
includes them. So it flips straight to the woman, and let's see, her eyes are closed, and I believe then it goes over to the
Right.
Frenchman. His eyes are kind of dreary and weepy, and then he blinks and kind of seems to come back. The trapper does some kind of blink and really comes back, and then the woman like opens her
Right.
eyes and is kind of like gasps a little bit, and they're like, that's somebody
Mhm.
was like, that's when they die. And it was just,
I
there's
definitely
only
had that feeling in rewatching it
yeah,
today, actually. It's sort of
Uh,
kind of, but I had that like, oh, she just died.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really convincing one, but again,
Mhm.
like it's just so like it's so perfectly not concrete in what it's saying that I think
mhm.
that
Mhm.
that's part of the
Right.
artistry of it.
I think you could even make the case that they go through the 5 stages of grief. And even though the 5 stages of grief are kind of bullshit, like there's definitely bargaining, right? There's definitely denial. There's they're fighting, they're angry. So I think you could say they probably go through all that, and especially the last frame of this is the Frenchman who enters last, but then kind of enters through the door with a smile and um aware of what he's doing. And that definitely, to me, that frame, that moment is this man is aware of what his fate is and he's finally accepted it and decided to accept it in style. I love that. So um that felt very, very devil may care of this man knows he's dead and is going to whatever's next. But again, like that is yeah, I maybe take for granted that this is a accepted interpretation because like there's people who think no, everyone's alive, or they're kind of I think in metaphor saying that they're bounty hunters, but there's even reviews of this movie who that refer to them as bounty hunters. I think like the Wikipedia refers to these two guys as bounty
Yeah,
hunters, which is
no, that's too
insane.
surface level.
Right,
That's if that's your takeaway, you're just watching. Because
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, even in the where they park finally, you can tell very
Hmm.
obviously that the buildings on the other side of the street there are just
Right,
facades. There's no buildings.
right.
And I
Yeah.
just realized this last night when I was watching it. When they show the shot of the carriage where you're looking past it, there's this
Hmm.
random bridge that has streetlights on it, and
Right.
no other town. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just so there's something so obviously not real about what's going
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
Well, and even if that is the real theory, that placement wise, then it makes sense too to have it at the end, and that's so nice to like
Mhm.
have that placement
Right.
there. That I love that theory.
Well, I do really like that the opening and closing are the most aggressive stylistically. They're the most
Yeah.
bold. I don't mean aggressive
Mhm.
by a negative means by any interpretation. I love that, but they're the most stylized. Um, it's also, I think the last one's maybe the most worthy of rewatching because among other details, they do tell I'm sorry, I have it here. I just need to pull up the characters' names. The Englishman and the Irish. It's Clarence and Thigpen. Sorry if I'm not saying that right, but they do kind of tell the other passengers how it works. And the Englishman's saying,
Mhm.
I distract them while the Irishman thumps them and kills them, essentially, are, whatever that actually means. And so you can kind of rewatch this and think, well, what's the moment where he's doing what? Because he says, I distracted the story. Then he starts telling about the Midnight Caller and he doesn't finish the tale you
Mhm.
know and he's telling about the power of ghost stories too, of how we want to have a story where the characters are us but not us. They're dead, I'm alive. And so he's telling them so aggressively about this. So to me, that's the distraction. But also I think they're all so absolutely moved by the song the Irishman sings, which, to be fair, you hear an Irish person singing in that gorgeous accent in person, it's gonna affect you, and it's Brendan
Mhm.
Gleeson. But maybe that's the thumping, maybe that's the swing of the scythe or whatever it is. But I think that's kind of the moment. If there is an action that, again, in my interpretation here, the Grim Reapers that needs to be taken by the Grim Reaper, I think it's that song that he sings. I think that's the moment of
Mhm.
him collecting the souls or finalizing the kill or whatever it is, because they all have such a reaction to that that kind of ends with them being calmed but also kind of defeated and no longer worried about what they were arguing about previously. So, but that's my interpretation of watching this like 3 hours ago. Maybe I watch this again and I know at a different time where there's a distraction or a different time where there's the kill or whatever. But it's the most like ripe for over analysis, which can be really fun. So,
Mhm.
um, Mir, you're the guest here. Is there anything else you really want to make sure we discuss? And it can be anywhere in this
Mhm.
movie, anything whatsoever. I want to make sure we cover this as thoroughly as you'd like. Anything
I would
we
open it to even like Coen Brothers stuff themselves. Like, is
sure.
that like, is there a aspect of their filmmaking that is just so, I mean, we've been talking about it a lot of this
Mhm,
time, but is there something that really speaks to you, maybe?
it's fair.
Um, I think the like again, having gone through all the Coen brother movies, it really it really culminates a lot of things. And I think, you know, if their filmmaking ended here, it would lend a lot more credence to my running theory that Coen Brothers movies are westerns unless you can tell me otherwise.
Oh.
Um, and
I
the
like this
best
theory for
example, I
the
mean,
record. Just gonna check in
yeah,
and say that.
and we've already talked about Oh Brother Where Art Thou. There are certainly
Hmm.
Yeah,
Western themes to that, even though it's going on in the South. Um,
right.
I mean, Big Lebowski, super easy example, right? Like
Sure.
that one is not a Western in name or like most of the visual presentation, but we do have a guy trying to find his way in the world and figuring
Hmm.
out how he relates to things, right?
We have a
So,
cowboy who narrates the thing too, right? We have a cowboy, we have
yes,
a tumbleweed.
that is one of the more
It
obvious.
invites the comparison. So
Yeah. So I think a lot of a lot of Coen Brothers movies have those themes, and it does kind of all go back, I think, to what Seth already said about some of the themes that they bring from their understanding of the Jewish tradition, and because you could make those same arguments about a very serious man, like certainly not a
absolutely.
Western
Yeah.
like by most views of it, but still has some very similar themes. Um,
Mm,
so I don't know. It's really
Hmm.
it's interesting in a lot of ways because it's not quite like a lot of their other movies. I mean, I think that a very serious man, Big Lebowski, Fargo all have this
Hmm.
connection where we've got this really interesting cultural interestingly cultural bubble of people, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
they just behave in this way that we expect them to, but that is still so ridiculous and chaotic that it is really funny and jarring. And I think
Hmm.
it's really interesting how like they've like been able to capture that realism and distill it, I suppose, into these smaller stories. I think that again, that's what
Yeah.
seems kind of masterful about it.
Okay.
And I suppose my last plug for this movie, if somebody were to watch it and think that is just very like silly and not very engaging, is that I think one of the fun things about this movie is you can start it at any of the beginnings of any of the vignettes and watch
Mm,
from there, and it's a very interesting
Hmm.
experience. I mean, it's not like world bending or anything, but they do all stand up on their own very, very well, which
Hmm.
what you
mm,
guys have said too. Like they all seem pretty deep, and it seems like there's quite a bit to analyze in each of them. They seem pretty complete.
right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just want to talk a little bit because we've kind of skipped over one of them. We've only talked about a little bit, and so you'll have a chance to say your last words again. I think the love story in The Girl Rattled is actually really beautiful.
Mhm.
And you really do have
Yeah.
it's a very sweet love story. And the kind of biggest and this one involves a woman thinking she needs to kill herself to save herself, and then kind of miraculously doesn't need to. A shootout ends up positively, but she assumed the worst and did take her life still. So it's darkly funny. It doesn't feel, and it's not that funny while you're watching it because it's really sad, but that also is on the level of some of the other things you probably already laughed at in this movie if you've seen it. So it kind of is one interest in one way. It's kind of put in a mirror to you, right? Like you've laughed at, if you're this far in the movie, right, you've already laughed at a lot of guys being killed just in that opening sequence, but now we know this woman and now it's really fucking sad. So there's that. But the other kind of interesting thing in that is the guy, Mr. Arthur, almost never talks during this whole segment
He
until this last
grumbles
scene
more
where
often.
he mumbles a lot. He even
Yes.
when his like best friend, maybe the only guy he knows, is telling him serious stuff like, I think I would have proposed to this woman. He does not respond. But then when he actually is really needed, he's there for her. He's supporting her. He's telling her what she needs to do. He's also
Yeah.
being really good morale about we're gonna get through this, don't worry. And it's really on it in a way that like I forget when I rewatch this movie of how on his shit he is,
Mm.
not just in like being able to like kill the attackers and read the lane, but and also like being able to provide support to someone who really needs it, who's never been in the situation before. And so that to me also adds the sadness of that scene of as good as he is, and he because he gave her correct advice, she just misinterpreted it and that happened, you know?
No,
So
no,
you
no,
kind
no,
of get to
no.
know this guy in the last like 2 minutes, right?
No, she interpreted it exactly correctly, and she's
You're right.
so obedient and
You're
Yeah.
right.
trying to do the right thing that she does
Yeah.
exactly what she's told and is finally, fallen by that, right? Which is,
Right.
Mhm.
also really, really sad.
And sorry, that's a great point too, because yeah, she is. I think we alluded to this, if not flat out said, like yeah, she's going on this wagon train because her brother says maybe, brother is proudly saying, she's gonna get married, and the real story is there's a guy who might marry her if the brother could talk her into it. Maybe nothing's actually been writing, maybe there's absolutely nothing to this because this dude's had several failed businesses and is just kind of full of
Mhm.
shit. It's also a really weird movie where you have a cute dog who is a major problem. And as much as that dog is cute and I always love a dog in the movie, like it's not a feel good thing. The dog
Yeah.
generally
Plot to shoot
causes
shoot the dog.
yeah,
Well,
you
and
know.
the plot to shoot the dog, if it would have been successful, would have simplified many
Yeah,
things.
exactly. But there is a moment here where they try to shoot the dog runs away too fast, and
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
folks, we love our dogs. But it's that's another level of the realism of this is the yappy dog everyone's complaining about that is actually a problem on this wagon
Well,
train.
so one more detail to your point about Arthur being so communicative when he needs to is that if you
Hmm.
go back and the printed plate
Mm.
before the vignette shows Arthur and the dog walking back over a hill, and the caption underneath it says Mr. Arthur had no idea what he was going to say to Billy Knapp. So again,
Yeah,
like
Mhm.
at a loss for words, or not going to be sharing anything, or something. I don't know.
right. No, which I have to say real quick, I'm really glad you pointed that to me, like the previous time we watched this together, because I wasn't watching for that this time and I saw it, and that just
Mhm.
adds such a like it's already so sad, but then here's putting a cherry in
Mhm.
this fucking sadness Sunday of he has no idea how to communicate. And by this point you also really like Billy. Billy's great, and he's
Mhm.
this um much more verbose, but also fairly stoic, Western cowboy who's helping a lady out and they're about to get married.
Yeah.
So there's emotional heft to all of these. They are not, this is not, you're just watching the same thing 6 times. They're all really different. And um, I will also say, I think I love when I get into an author I haven't read before, I love grabbing a short story collection. So if you haven't seen a Coen Brother movie before, this is kind of a
Mhm.
fun I'm Louis Booth's an appetizer platter. Start here if
Yeah.
for whatever reason you haven't yet. So
Yeah. You
sorry for that
you guys
tangent,
were
but Megan, go in.
you guys were touching on it, but you reminded me that like I also like I just love the way that these people speak, and it's all very different, and
Yes.
like the script is like tight, and like
Hmm.
the I just love the way that everyone's really fully fleshed out. There it's
Hmm.
not vignettes and like that. It's we talked about like the scenery and stuff, which is so beautiful and such a plus to it, but I think for me what shined is a lot of the dialogue, and that shined in Coen Brothers, or in Oh Brother Where Art Thou as well
Yeah.
for me. Like I from what I remember, it's just like the way that these characters just kind of are really well fleshed out, and especially in vignettes they have to be, of course, but That's true for this one as well. So it's a bunch of such a variety too of like what we're getting, but all very interesting and a lot of twang going on, but it's great.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, Megan, and apologize, because I know you've heard this rant before, but the
Mm,
Coen Brothers, for actors they reuse often, which is quite a few people. They usually
mhm.
have the common characteristic of they all were classically trained. Not, I mean, not just they did Shakespeare, but like they did ancient Greek plays, ancient Roman plays, and they
Yes.
are very good at elevated language. Because even though it might not sound like that, that's even like a movie set in modern day is going to have a rhythm that you'll need to understand. That you'll need to understand
Yes.
different meters that, um, and I think they're maybe the best at it in the same way that we talked about with our Blue Velvet episode. If there's people who think these Lynch characters aren't real, they're real. And I
Hmm.
think in this, similarly in the same way that Lynch loves those guys, I think the Coen brothers love these people. I think they love these weird guys Stephen Root plays who you'll ask them a simple question, they'll be talking for 10, 20 minutes if you don't stop them. I definitely get a feel that they're not like this asshole. No, this guy's great.
Yeah.
This is the person we met before, and there's an affection that I feel for them that feels
Hmm.
very human to me that I really appreciate in their movies because there are so many truly lovingly bizarre characters in all Conrad's movies, and by the nature of being a vignette, you get a lot of them in this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they're often verbose. Um, cool. So yeah, I think we're kind of coming to our final thoughts here. So I'll give it to you one more time here. Anything we missed that has to be said about the Ballad of Buster
Mhm.
Scruggs before we uh end it?
Um, no,
Okay,
I don't think so. I would just
cool.
say
We
I
did it.
would say go back, watch The Mortal Remains 20 times
Yeah.
intentionally and see how
Ooh.
you feel about it.
All
Uh-huh.
right. Say it like that. All right, Megan, same question for you. And then
I
if not,
got
we'll move on to recommendations.
I got a lot in talking to you guys about it because it is worthy of rewatches, and I think that kind of speaks to
Hmm.
the art, kind of the artistry of what, from what little I know of the Coen Brothers, of what has come out for me as well. So I can only assume that this is a great um intro, like introduction to their
Yeah,
style and art form, and it's a blast. It's so much fun.
great. Fully agree. Yeah, I think this is a great intro, folks. And I already said that, but bottom line is with all movies we talk about, if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's pretty great. Okay, Mir, are you good to start us off on our recommendations as the guest?
Oh yeah.
Talk us
I
up.
would if people like this, or I would really say if there's anything that people really latched onto with one of these vignettes, um, where they're like, oh, I just love that. I could do more of that. I would say that all of these things are in some capacity presented in a more classical Western style, but still in a Coen Brothers style in True Grit.
Hmm.
Um, and True Grit, I think, um, um, it just it's a simpler movie from a storytelling standpoint
Mhm.
because there's only one storyline. So that's not that's not much of a competition. But that has Matt Damon and oh my gosh, I can't
Jeff
remember the other
Bridges.
guy's name. Bridges, yes, Jeff Bridges.
Jeff
Hmm.
Bridges, yeah.
Um, and they're just opposing cowboys from different eras who are being forced to work together and disliking every single second of it, and they both do it perfectly. So
Yeah.
that, and if anybody's in Milwaukee, you go to Apollo Euros and get yourself a euro.
Ooh.
I'm glad we got that call out here. Um,
Mm.
peek behind the scene. I did mention to Amir about and give an example of how open we are to what could be recommended. That restaurants have been recommended more
Oh,
often than I realized on this. So yes, we love gyros. We love Apollo
so
gyros.
very
Absolutely.
fair.
Megan,
Very
you better
fair
give a
recommendation.
Fremont call out here.
I
But
know.
Megan, you go first. Sorry.
Sure. I I should say also that it's so fun to do this podcast with people that know things because in my small brain, I have seen more Coen Brothers than I realized, and I've seen True Grit, and I also the one I'm going to recommend that I really liked in thinking about it and like remembering it was Hail Caesar from 2016, and
Yeah.
it has cowboy elements in it, and it's all set in a maybe like 19 I forget the set 1950s is what I looked it up now of
Yeah.
Hollywood filmmaking and like very large cast of kind of heavy hitters like we got George Clooney but our I remember the cowboy in that is Alden Ehrenreich who
Hmm.
that was maybe the first thing I saw him in and he was so good as like our kind of a dopey cowboy lover boy, and his accent is so thick that they can't use him in anything. And like that plot is just perfect. I can't get over that. So, I remember really liking that visually. It from what I remember in us talking now, it kind of hits on the stylistic themes that seems to be kind
Yeah.
of like a heavy hitter for the Coen brothers. So I will recommend Hail Caesar.
I want to chime back in here.
Oh,
So
please.
I first saw that movie because of another thread of movies.
Mm.
Because me and my wife started watching a bunch of
Oh
um,
yeah.
um, oh my gosh, what's his name?
Josh Brolin.
No, Ralph
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Fiennes.
Mm-hmm.
A
Ray
bunch of
Fiennes.
Yes, sorry. We started watching a bunch of his movies in a row, and we hit that one and got halfway through it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is way more than I bargained for." And
Yeah.
I had like fallen asleep, and we had to like come back to it. But it's
Mm-hmm.
his scene with the cowboy where he's trying to like
Yes.
get this
I
line
know
out of him,
exactly
and
what you're talking
the
about.
cowboy's just way too simple to even understand what the words are, let alone be able to say them on
Oh
screen.
my God.
It's so good.
It really was. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, I have to thank both of you so much because I had written down both these movies in case neither of you recommended these. I think they're just like if we're talking about Coen Brothers
Yay.
westerns, these are like two that need to come up, even though they kind of did. So fully endorsing both of these as well. I think, and if my ramblings about form are kind of confusing, my apologies, folks. I don't really want to explain that anymore. Just like watch like a John Wayne Western. That's a kind of classic Western. There's shit before that. There's shit after that. Then there's spaghetti Westerns in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
There's more violent stuff like that. Then there's like a really long lull, right? So all that to say, a thing that's particularly great about True Grit is that while the Ballad of Buster Scruggs deals with a lot of different, maybe the entirety of styles of westerns, going back to like Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and all of that. True Grit is just a classic western. It's not a neo western. It's not a spaghetti western. It's just a classic John Wayne era western, and it's really fucking good at being that. And it's also it's really rare that you have a movie in a kind of antiquated genre that's not a neo whatever. Like it's really rare to just have a noir that's not a neo noir, meaning there's some kind of weird twist on it. So it's such a weird pure. You're like watching a movie that could have come out in 1956, but it came out in 2010, and it's perfect. And it is better. Speaking of John Wayne, of the John Wayne version of True Grit. So um one of the most necessary remakes because if anyone's going to remake something to make it better, it's going to be the Coen Brothers. On this same vein, No Country for Old Men is going to be my recommendation. I'm glad we're
Mm-hmm.
sticking all Coen Brothers, which is a neo noir. Sorry, is a neo noir and neo western. It is a mystery, and it's set in the 80s. It's definitely a western now. And if you liked the kind of existential dread that some of these vignettes could give you, this is the movie. It's definitely stylistically very bold. It makes a lot of choices that you don't even realize are making till afterwards. I'm and it's a movie that I think people still kind of debate about who's actually the main character. Oddly, people debate about whether or not there's a soundtrack. There is. It's very muted, but It's based off a Cormac McCarthy novel. It's heightened, it's intense, it's beautiful. But like if you enjoyed the kind of more like again, dread qualities of, and if you enjoy classic tragedy of one man makes one decision that means he's doomed, then this is the type of movie. So, and it's one of their best, and I believe won the Oscars for it. Oscars because both of them there. So, um, yeah, that's my recommendation. I think we've covered the big three westerns, even though I do
Yeah.
frankly agree with you, Mir, that all their movies could be argued to be a western, including fucking Hudsucker Proxy, which is like 1940s New York. So
Hmm.
there's a case for I think all of them. But well, folks, we did it. We talked about it. It's been a long time
Done.
coming.
Check mark.
Yeah.
Coen Brothers.
Yes. We
Muir,
had to
it was
start with
such a
just the one
pleasure.
brother before we came on. So yes, Samir, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for indulging me with such an odd movie that
Oh,
people are sometimes not willing to look too deep into.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding vein. And apologies, I should have done this earlier. But I wanted to highlight, Mir, you watch this movie all the time, right? Like, do you know how many times you've seen this movie, or is it too many to count?
I couldn't tell you because I've watched it a bunch of times, and again,
oh,
part of that is because it's so easy to throw it on anywhere in the middle of it and get
Right.
into it.
Yeah.
I'm certain I've watched it 30 times.
Okay.
oh.
And to me, that's a high number for what this movie is, for this being
Right.
frankly a highbrow movie. And I just want to highlight that because I've been reflecting on like I don't rewatch movies that I love as often as maybe I should. And there have been studies
Mm-hmm.
kind of recommending, rewatch your favorite movies. It's rewarding. But you rewatch this movie the same way that people rewatch Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, things like that. And I love that. And I'm just gonna recommend to that folks, if you have like a movie that you love for whatever reason, don't feel bad about rewatching it. Rewatch this off this one. You're gonna have a great
That's
time.
true.
And I just wanted to just kind of highlight that you do that because it's made me reflect. And I have rewatched my favorite movies from recently, and it's been really great. And worst case
Mm.
is I don't like that movie as much as I thought I did, and then I watched something else that I like. So um just recommend that as a general practice, film optimist. So
I think a
Indeed.
side challenge for Film Optimist fans is watch every single Coen Brother movie like
mhm.
Seth and Muir did.
Catch up to Mir and I. Yeah.
Yes. Put it in the comments below if you
So
made the
so
challenge, guys.
I think there's one particularly bad one, Mir. I think you think there's more than one. Do you want to give your little disclaimer for this challenge?
Oh, well, my disclaimer would be if I was not as invested in doing that, I would have been okay with skipping some of them.
Sure,
If
sure.
I went back and tried to do it again, I would skip a couple. And yes, there was one that I personally really disliked because it was just too much for me. I think like I mentioned, like so many of the Coen Brothers movies like are so ridiculous and chaotic, but
Mhm.
it feels
Yes.
like in a very real way. And this one that I didn't like, it was so ridiculous and
You can
chaotic that
you
it
can say
took
what it
me.
is.
Yeah, I really disliked the Hudsucker Proxy. It was
Yeah.
just way too over the top, and I didn't have a good time. But maybe it's just for
Oh,
kids.
The Lady Killers is worse though, right? I think I sorry for folks who don't know, he referenced the movie while dissing it, which is hilarious. But the Lady Killers is a worse movie though, right? Mir? Their version of it.
I No.
You don't think so? Okay, fair enough. I think the Lady Killers is their worst movie, and it's a remake of a British movie, and um, it's Tom Hanks. It has a lot of things that should work, but did not work for me. So there's
Certainly
at
not one of their
least
best, but
it's certainly not one of their best,
yeah.
but like like these. While I like the Hudsucker, it's a very alienating movie. A lot of people don't, so like I grant your points to it, and it's a very weird, bold movie.
Yes.
Um, but most of their movies are pretty universally acclaimed. You're not in for that much
mm,
risk, in seeing
Yeah.
even the movies that you might think are kind of like a mid, like the middle of the road movies for them are really good. They're really fun. Like Intolerable Cruelty was a movie I avoided watching for a long time because I thought it wasn't gonna be that good. I had a blast watching that. That's George Clooney's a divorce attorney. That was great. So I was pleasantly surprised by watching a lot of movies that I'd put off before. And it was purely just, well, this one's not talked as much as this one. And it turned out most of those movies were still really great. Like Hell Caesar, there's a lot of people who don't like it, but I think I love that
Yeah.
movie. So
I remember
And
backlash for it, and I was like, I like
yeah,
it.
yeah,
and I think the other thing too about kind of if you're trying to, rank Coen Brothers movies, one of the challenges is that their movies and their storytelling starts out being more novice than it ends up. They clearly develop their skills along the way, which
right,
it makes it
right,
tough to like talk down on any of their movies because they're all kind of necessary steps in where they're going. But I will say the most rewarding
right.
part of watching those all in a row was when you get to Oh Brother Where Art Thou. It's like there's Oh Brother Where Art Thou, there's
Yeah,
Fargo, there's Big Lebowski, there's just all these great ones right in a row, which is a lot of fun.
yeah. You're right. There was like that four in a row. Like, oh man, we're eating well,
Yes.
Yeah.
and it was bliss. It was awesome. So, man, it's right. Yeah, there's a lot of great ones in a row. So I think it's worth doing, folks, and just give yourself a weird challenge. So
Mhm.
I do this with authors often, um, directors, etc. But I'm pretentious, so you know what? Take it as we will. But all right, folks, back to the more important shit. Watch this movie. We hope you like it. Um, Mir, anything you want to plug? We didn't talk about this, but if you have anything, you can be your Twitter account or whatever.
Nope. I got
Cool.
nothing.
All
He
right,
says,
perfect.
Don't find me."
Do not find me.
Don't find me anywhere. You won't like it. And I won't either. So
Perfect.
But for us, it was a pleasure. As
yes. Thank
of
you
course,
guys.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. All right, folks, that's gonna do it for this episode. We hope you check out just the Coen Brothers in general, but specifically Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Take care.